The exposition of everyday, average being toward death was oriented toward the structures of everydayness developed earlier. In being toward death, Dasein is related to itself as an eminent potentiality of. But the self of everydayness is the Dasein that is constituted in the public interpretedness, which expresses itself in idle talk. Thus, idle talk must make manifest in what way everyday Dasein interprets its being toward death. Understanding, which is also always attuned, that is, mooted, always forms the basis of this interpretation. Thus we must ask how the attuned understanding lying in the idle talk of the they has disclosed being toward death. How is the they related in an understanding way to the almost, non-relational, and insuperable possibility of Dasein? What attunement discloses to the they that it has been delivered over to death, and in what way? The publicness of everyday being with one another knows death as a constantly occurring event, as a case of death. Someone or another dies, be it a neighbor or a stranger. People unknown to us die daily and hourly. Death is encountered as a familiar event occurring within the world. As such, it remains in the inconspicuousness 10 characteristic of everyday encounter. They has also already secured an interpretation for this event. The fleeting talk about this which is either expressed or else mostly kept back says, one also dies at the end, but for now one is not affected unbetroffen. The analysis of one dies reveals unambiguously the kind of being of everyday being toward death. In such talk, death is understood as an indeterminate something which first has to show up from somewhere, but right now is not yet present for oneself, and is thus no threat. One dies spreads the opinion that death, so to speak, strikes the public interpretation of Dasein says that one dies, because in this way everyone can convince him or herself that in no case is it I myself, for this one is no one. Dying is leveled down to an event which does concern Dasein, but which belongs to no one in particular. If idle talk is always ambiguous, so is this way of talking about death. Dying, which is essentially and irreplaceably mine, is distorted into a publicly occurring event which the they encounter. Characteristic talk speaks about death as a constantly occurring case. It treats it as something always already real, and veils its character of possibility and concomitantly the two factors belonging to it, that is, its non-relationality and its insuperability. With such ambiguity, Dasein puts itself in the position of losing itself in the they with regard to an eminent potentiality of being that belongs to its own self. They justifies and increases the temptation of covering over, for itself, its almost being toward death. The evasion of death which covers over dominates everydayness so stubbornly that, in being with one another, those closest by often try to convince the one who is dying that he will escape death and soon return again to the tranquilized everydayness of his world taken care of. This concern has the intention of thus comforting the dying person. It wants to bring him back to Dasein by helping him to veil completely his own most non-relational possibility. Thus, they provides a constant tranquilization about death. But basically, this tranquilization is not only for the dying person, but just as much for those comforting him. And even in the case of demise, the carefreeness that the public has provided for itself is still not to be disturbed and made uneasy by the event. Indeed, the dying of others is seen often as a social inconvenience, if not a downright tactlessness, from which the public should be spared 12. But along with this tranquilization, which keeps Dasein away from its death, the they at the same time justifies itself and makes itself respectable by silently ordering the way in which one is supposed to behave toward death in general. Even thinking about death is regarded publicly as cowardly fear, a sign of insecurity on the part of Dasein and a gloomy flight from the world. They does not permit the courage to have anxiety about death. The dominance of the public interpretedness of the they has already decided what attunement is to determine our stance toward death. In anxiety about death, Dasein is brought before itself as delivered over to its insuperable possibility. They is careful to distort this anxiety into the fear of a future event. Anxiety, made ambiguous as fear, is moreover taken as a weakness which no self-assured Dasein is permitted to know. What is proper, according to the silent decree of the they, is the indifferent calm as to the fact that one dies. The cultivation of such a superior indifference estranges entfremdet Dasein from its almost non-relational potentiality of being. Temptation, tranquilization, and estrangement, however, characterize the kind of being of falling prey. Entangled, everyday being toward death is a constant flight from death. Being toward the end has the mode of evading that end, reinterpreting it, understanding it inauthentically, and veiling it. Factically, one's own Dasein is always already dying. That is, it is in a being toward its end. And it conceals this fact from itself by reinterpreting death as a case of death occurring every day with others, a case which always assures us still more clearly that one is oneself, still alive. But in the entangled flight from death, the everydayness of Dasein bears witness to the fact that the they itself is always already determined as being toward death, even when it is not explicitly engaged in thinking about death. Even in average everydayness, Dasein is constantly concerned with its own most non-relational and insuperable potentiality of being, even if only in the mode of taking care of things in a mode of untroubled indifference glycoticate that opposes the most extreme possibility of its existence. The exposition of everyday being toward death, however, gives us at the same time a directive to attempt to secure a complete existential concept of being toward the end, by a more penetrating interpretation in which entangled being toward death is taken as an evasion of death. That before which one flees has been made visible in a phenomenally adequate way. We should now be able to project phenomenologically how evasive Dasein itself understands its death, though.